Alright, hey guys, Brian here. Welcome to vlog number 7. So, currently coming back home from walking the dogs and just wanting to kind of give a nice little explanation of what we're doing today. So, I think today we're gonna do more of a long-term thoughts / review of what it's like to own the WRX STI for 4 years. I've owned mine since 2020, and so I think I'll kind of get into depth about what that's been like, how long I've been modifying it for, how long have I kind of tweaked the engine, and would I recommend it to someone else. But before we start that, here is Hazel and Mac. They're about ready to head inside, but with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy the sequence, and I'll catch you guys on the other side. Alright, we're back. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the little sequence. The canyon was a little bit more crowded than it normally is, which is weird. So I was kind of stopped, or at least not stopped, but just slowed down by some of the slower cars, you know. And obviously I try to not be a douche and give them a lot of space and give them time to kind of get around. But we're here now. I am currently inside of the STI right now. It's a little bit messy. I think I gotta kind of clean out some of the tools I have in here, because if you guys heard during the sequence, you guys are gonna kind of hear like things wrestling all around. But let me go ahead and flip the camera for you guys. But yeah, here we are inside the STI. But yeah, man, this type RA suede steering wheel, big must if you guys have an STI. I say definitely transforms the feel of the car. And then yeah. Alright, decided to step out the car for a little bit, but yeah, kind of parked in my favorite spot. This is Little Tahunga again. But just wanted to give you guys a quick little long-term review of the STI. I'm gonna go ahead and flip the camera back to me now. But I feel like there's tons of videos kind of already going through like the pros and cons of each generation of STI and WRX, and kind of like the ownership or what to expect and things that you need to be wary of when buying a WRX. And I feel like I don't really want to kind of build off of that. I want to do this more specifically geared towards, I guess, the VA STI or WRX, just because I feel like that's really the old experience I really have. I mean, I had a blob eye before. I had that for about a year, and that's a great car too, and I highly recommend that generation as well. And I mean, the Hawkeye obviously is the best generation, and then you got the stink eyes. And there's a lot of different ways to go there, but I feel like this is more geared towards people that are looking into buying possibly a used VA WRX STI, and more specifically just the STI, you know. Um, so with that being said, let's let's get into it. So I got my STI new, and I bought it in 2020, right before COVID happened, and so I feel like I was really able to get a pretty good deal because of that. Um, I'm only paying like 1% interest on this thing, which is pretty crazy, especially knowing like the prices of cars now and like what I'm paying for the Corolla. Um, but got in 2020, had 0 miles on it. So far, I have about 35,000 miles now. I've owned the car for 4 years. I really haven't had any real serious issues. And I know you guys looking into the used market, a lot of the cars on the used market might possibly have even higher miles than I do. So there's a lot of different variations and a lot of different issues kind of associated with the higher mileage WRXs and STIs. So that's something to be wary of. So far with my car, I've always done the maintenance. I've always done the maintenance myself. I make sure I always change spark plugs when I need to, change flush coolant when I need to, flush oil when I need to. It's the nature of having a tuned car, clean out the injectors every once in a while, things of that nature. I always kind of try to stay on top of it. Better to be ahead of it than behind it, because if you're behind it, your engine goes boom. And that's something that needs to be noted when it comes to owning an STI. It's not as simple as owning, let's say, the GR Corolla, or even as simple as owning a any other car, even like a Honda Civic Type R or SI. Like those platforms, you're able to get into them. You're able to buy parts, all the parts that you would possibly ever want, and then you're able to just throw them on, drive them around, no issues, no nothing. These cars are very, very sensitive. So as far as even just throwing on, like, things that I got away with, right, when I owned the car. So for about 10,000 miles, I just threw on a blow off, but not just any blow off, because you can't just throw on a blow off on these cars either, because their system is made to recirculate the air back into the intake, and if you take that air from the intake, you're gonna kind of throw off the computer and what it's thinking. So I had a recirculating blow off valve, so pretty much it would only go off when it was under very, very high boost, pretty much when I'm flooring it, right? And so with that being said, it wasn't really changing too much of the system that was already currently on there, just blowing off some of that excess air that it felt that it can kind of give up to the system. And that blow off valve, if you guys are wondering, is the Go Fast Bits recirculating blow off valve on the GFB. And so I ran that for about, I want to say, 12,000 miles. No tune, no cob, nothing else though, just the blow off and the catback exhaust. And I did that for about 12,000 miles. And I never had any issues. And the car ran fine. The car felt normal. I would take it to the canyons, no issues. I know a lot of people are like super against even doing that. But if you're gonna run a real blow off valve like the HKS I have on there now, that doesn't give any air back to the intake, now that's when you're gonna definitely have to get tuned. But that's what I'm saying with this car, as as anything as simple as even putting an intake into the car, a cob intake or something like that, just to get like a little bit more sound, you need to get a tune. And that's kind of like what kind of turns people off of the platform. But I feel like it's also a good thing. I feel like owning this car and doing all the research that I had to do, in order to really familiarize myself with the platform and what I'm doing, and making sure I'm not going to blow anything up, was all kind of very important. It was all part of knowing cars. Now I know so much about turbos I didn't know about. I know about fueling, I know about injectors, like all of those things that like I didn't really pay attention to before, because I was like, oh, it's just a car, lower it, put some wheels, throw an intake in there and just go. Who cares about all these things? Owning this car has really kind of showed me the importance of why those things matter and why you should probably, you know, pay attention to those things and do it in the right way. Um, and so as far as that goes, you know, I did that for 12,000 miles, and then I went and I purchased my first intake, which was the Cobb intake, and then with that I had to purchase the Cobb access port, and that was pretty much the point of which when I got my car, when I knew the warranty was gone and I'm on my own. And this was probably after about maybe 2 years of ownership, and it was a big decision for me to make. I was a little bit scared, a little bit nervous, but here I am, you know, 2 years after that, and the car's still running. Car's just fine. You know, I've had the tune. I've had two different tunes, and I had two different setups. So my first setup is something that's a little bit more entry level, and I feel like it's something that a lot of people can do. And if you guys want to start tuning and start really building a proper setup that's going to be healthy, that the car's going to be happy, that you're not going to, you know, blow anything up or get anything upset, and your tuner is going to be happy with, let me kind of go over what that was. So pretty much my first setup was just pretty much full bolt-ons minus the headers, minus an up pipe, minus the turbo, but everything else was changed. And that's what you need to do with these cars, because with this car in particular, the VA chassis, for whatever reason, they didn't put enough fueling into it. So if you are going to do a downpipe and an intake, just doing those two alone, you're gonna have to upgrade fueling. If not, then you're gonna run into a lot of issues where you're kind of running the car a little bit too lean and it's not gonna be happy. So with that being said, the setup that I had was a flex fuel setup, and it was running the Cobb intake, Cobb catted downpipe, 1050X injectors, and the Cobb flex fuel kit with the AEM fuel pump, TGV deletes, AEM or IAG fuel rails, and I ran that setup pretty much as it was. You know, obviously you need to get the boost controller, things like that, with the same blow-off valve, same top mount, literally same the stock top mount, and I ran it like that for a little bit over a year, and that made good power. It made, if I remember correctly, it was about 275 wheel horsepower and about 435 wheel torque, and it was a very, very fun tune. And that was probably one of my favorite tunes. I think I might like that tune more than I like the tune I have currently with the big turbo setup, because changing a turbo, you know, it makes bigger numbers, but it does change the way that the car behaves, the way that the car wants to put down power. So with that being said, you know, that's something to note. But that, with doing the setup that I did using the stock turbo, it was maxing out the stock turbo, but it was kind of, you know, the car still behaved the way that it was always intended to behave with that turbo. It's just it's a lot more alive, and you're actually getting all the power that you would want straight to the wheels, and the car just feels so much more peppy. It feels so much more alive, right? And so I ran that setup, and I highly recommend that setup. And I feel like if you're going to run any setup just as an entry level setup, I feel like that is the way to go, because that's kind of the best way to get into it without putting the engine in danger, without undercutting anything that you might want to undercut just to save money. Because if there's one thing I learned, is saving money isn't always the best decision, or not cheaping out is better. I mean, just not taking shortcuts. But you don't necessarily have to take shortcuts and save money at the same time, especially if you're doing things and you're buying things off of like these places that can save you a lot of money, where there's like Facebook Marketplace now or OfferUp. You know, like, I want to say about like 80% of what I have in the car now are from those places. Like, I don't really like to buy new parts or new things. I always kind of get used things. And what I've learned is that I could kind of have these nicer items, these big name items, and I can save, you know, 50 to 40% off, you know, all the time. But you gotta know what you're doing too. Obviously, don't buy things that are, you know, really in bad shape and then kind of hope for it to work. You know, you're gonna have to buy things that, you know, you could kind of break even on. So like, let's say even like with my fuel injectors, I always bought my fuel injectors used, but I knew buying them used that I was always gonna have to get them cleaned and rebuilt pretty much. And so that's what I will do. I'll have to get them flow tested, make sure that they're actually working well, make sure that they actually work, you know, and get them rebuilt, all the O-rings replaced. And so I'll buy the 1050X injectors, for example. I'll buy them for literally like 80% off, knowing that I'm gonna have to put in an extra like $100 to $200, or maybe not even 100. I think it's like $80 or like $100 to get them flow tested and rebuilt. And knowing that I had to do that, and so I made sure when I bought the actual injectors that I was getting them at a price where I would still save, you know, an extra like $200, $300 off of those injectors, but also get them rebuilt and flow tested, so that way they're pretty much just like new, you know. And I'm not just risking it, putting untested injectors into the car. I'm just, you know, being a little smart about it, where you're buying these things and then you're just, you know, you're getting them, you're pretty much bringing them to new spec, and then now you're throwing them in and you got the big name item, but you saved yourself $200, $300. And you do that in the course of like 20 parts, you end up saving like 2,000 or 3,000, maybe even $5,000, which is crazy because everyone says like, oh, you're gonna throw like $10,000 into an STI just to break over 400 horsepower, which in like retrospect, or I guess like in theory, that's true, because all the parts I have in the car probably do tally up to about like $10,000 new. But did I spend that? No. I think the most I might have spent was like 3,000 bucks. And that's just because, you know, I'm doing the work, I'm finding the parts used, I'm making sure that they're getting rebuilt, I'm making sure that they're in great condition, I'm making sure that the person that I bought them from didn't abuse them or didn't break them, and then I'm throwing them in the car. And I'm saving, you know, a lot of money, you know. And that's kind of what brought me into my next setup, right? So building on the setup that I just kind of explained before, which was like kind of like a good step one. Now step two for me was going big turbo. And so pretty much everything that I had upgraded before stays the same, minus I just have to upgrade the injectors. So same process, buy them used, then get them flow tested, get them rebuilt, you know, and then throw them into the car. Doesn't take that hard, just gotta find a local shop near you, you know, it doesn't have to be that hard. And then so that's the one thing I have to upgrade when it comes to fuel. I should have upgraded the fuel pump. That's another story, that's another video, that's going to be another day when I battle that. But you know, you do that, and then from there you have, you know, from there all you need to do now is upgrade the turbo. So to upgrade the turbo, you need to change up the up pipe. I decided to run external wastegate. But the nice part about what I did with my turbo setup, which is kind of crazy, and it was crazy that I was able to find it, because I wanted to go with the FP green. I'm a big fan of Vanderbilt. I'm pretty sure all you WRX and STI people know who he is. He makes some crazy WRXs, and he gives out some amazing advice. So if you're gonna get into the platform, look him up, Vanderbilt. He builds the craziest STIs in probably like all of the United States, and it's honestly such great knowledge, and he goes into the bare minimums of what you should to build the most reliable STIs. And I kind of just literally just copy and pasted his setups onto my car, and I feel like it's the reason why I enjoy my car. I enjoy all the setups, I enjoy everything that the car is now. But I just know that there's a sense of these products have been tested, they've been battle tested, they've been abused, they've been really ran through to the point where we know what the limit is, and we know where not to push it, right? And so I went with FP Green, and I found it used on Facebook Marketplace, and I was able to get the turbo, the up pipe, the external wastegate, the headers, and the turbo inlet, and I was able to get all of that for about $1,000, which is insane. Because, you know, so I was able to kind of just cut the cost of just going big turbo for me, and with the injectors and just all of that stuff included with the little eBay little bend that I got. Just doing that alone, you know, going from my last setup to this setup, it was an extra, I want to say 1,500, and then I had to pay an extra 1,000 for the tune. So that's where it kind of got kind of brought up again. But with that being said, now I'm making the power that I really want to just experience. I've never had a car that was over 400 horsepower. Now I'm making, well over that. And so just that experience of being able to build that myself, and actually experience it for myself, and having the setup that I just know it's so good for the car. And I honestly, the FP green, it doesn't really lag too bad. It's not as bad as like an FP red or an FP zero or an FP black. Like it's a little bit smaller. It's bigger than FP green or blue, but it doesn't really lag, and it's like a nice power band to just track and drive around canyon roads. You're not really like, it's not just a big fist of like power just straight to your face. Like it's a very tasteful turbo. It does treat the car is different. Like it does behave different compared from stock to FP green. It is quite a bit bigger than stock, but I feel like honestly it just feels like the car was made for it. And the car for me personally, like I've had it with this setup for a year and a half now, and it's been very reliable. And so as far as like a long-term 4-year review with the car, do I recommend it? I do personally, and I'm sure a lot of people that own STIs are going to agree with me, is that this is probably one of the best cars I've ever owned. And I 100% believe that. It's funny because I was never an STI fan growing up, but me getting into this car and me driving around and me feeling like what it like just it's just a whole different experience. It's its own platform, and the way that it handles up here in the canyons is insane. And so it's one of those things where it's like it's been one of my most favorite cars in the world. It's been literally, I mean, hands down, I mean, knocking on wood, but it's been so reliable to me. Like the only issue that I've ever had with this car is a flex sensor overheat issue, but that's the flex sensor, and that's something I added to the car. It's not even part of the car's, like the car is not supposed to come with that. And then with that being said, the only other issues I run into are fuel pump issues with my fuel pump, but that's also something that I did myself. I'm pushing all this power, and I didn't really upgrade the fuel pump more than I had to make 360. I should have thought like maybe if I'm gonna push an extra 100 horsepower or so, maybe I should probably up the fuel pump. But with that being said, 4 years with the car. I love the car. It's more of my track car or my date or like my race car, right? I don't really drive it as much as I would the Corolla, and that's intentional because I just I want it to last as it is for as long as I can without having to rebuild the motor, because that's something that maybe down the line I'm gonna have to do. But I feel like as it is right now, you know, it's happy, and it's making really great power. And it's kind of one of those things where like if I don't have to, hopefully I'll just leave it like that for, who knows how long until something goes. But regardless, it's just one of those things where that kind of comes with the game of just building engines in general. Like if you're gonna build a big horsepower Evo, and the Evo has 80,000 miles on it already, or 90,000 miles, 100,000 miles, you're gonna probably have to touch that motor. You're gonna have to rebuild it, and that's part of making power. Like people talk a lot of crap about STIs and boxer engines in general, about how complicated it is and why they're so weak. And I felt like that was there might have been some truth to that before 2018, before the Type RA block existed. But since this block has kind of came to be, it's been a big change in like what the engine itself can actually handle as far as aftermarket potential and tuning potential. But either way, if you're going to be building big numbers, like if you're trying to push 600 800 horse, you're gonna it's obvious that you're gonna have to rebuild something, and you're gonna have to touch something, you're gonna have to strengthen something. And that's with every car. That's the 2JZ, same thing. Everything's the same thing. Like as much as you believe it, like all these engines these great engines, when they came out, they're all older now. So it's like if you're buying 120,000 mile Evo and you want to make it get up to 500 600 wheel, and the engine's never been rebuilt, but it's been like a stock kept engine, like yeah, there's some strength to that engine. Like it does, I mean, the Evo 9s, I believe they come closed deck, And so it's one of those things like that. Part of it is true, like it is strong, but that doesn't mean that like you're not gonna have to get in there anyways. And that kind of comes with the nature. That's the name of the game. You pay to play. And so, with that being said, my experience, my 4 years with this STI are different than, let's say, the everyday buyer that's not going to touch their engine. And that's kind of why I want to preface this by saying that this isn't really a 4-year review of just owning an STI. It's a 4-year review of messing with the STI, messing with the engine, messing with a lot of things, and kind of just testing it out so that way you guys don't necessarily have to. But man, this thing looks so mean, and you can't even deny the fact that it looks so mean. Here, let me flip the camera. And so, with that being said, do I recommend this? I do. I just recommend, if you're gonna get an STI, just make sure you really do your research and make sure that you really know what you're getting yourself into. Don't be lazy. Read the forums, watch all the videos. The thing is, there's such big STI and WRX pages at this point where it's like, if you're being negligent, it's on you, and you're just not doing the research yourself, because there's so much information out there on how to build these things properly that you should not have to. And if you're not even going to touch it and your goal is to never touch it, then you'll be fine. I don't think that there's any issues. Like, I really believe that this car, if I left it completely stock for the last 4 years and then I drove it for 20 plus years, maybe, I mean, obviously there's the wear tear items of owning a 20-year-old car, but other than that, like, it's totally fine. Like, this engine can handle this engine, what they give you out of the factory, the tune that they give you, like, yeah, I heard it's like a rougher tune, but at the same time, like, it's so underpowered compared to what the engine can handle now that it's gonna be reliable for years and years to come. When you're doing when you're buying your cars, though, when you're buying your used cars, obviously, check what the previous owners did and ask as much questions as you can, and don't buy a clapped out STI. If you're buying an STI, a 2020 STI that has like 180,000 miles on it in 4 years, that's insane. And that might not last as long as if you buy one that has only 40,000 or 50,000, because this thing, I mean, just to get to 180,000, from 50,000, you're going to be able to enjoy 130,000 miles before you even have to go down that road. So don't buy junk, do your research, tune the car correctly, and don't cheap out, but also use OfferUp to get good parts for a good deal. And anyways, I'm gonna leave you guys there. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys are enjoying the content. I'm gonna try to do more of this type of style content, and I'm gonna try to keep the videos shorter, but this is my baby, and I have a lot to say. I love STIs, I love WRXs. This is kind of the community I've been in for the last 4 years. So I hope you guys enjoy. I don't know it all, but I do know a lot. So see you guys on the next one. Peace.